Greetings. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho's STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection featuring Bella Genta, Payne International Development Fellow, U.S. Agency for International Development in Costa Rica. My name is Casey Gaylord Opaleski, and I am a programs manager here at EarthEcho International. We are so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us today for STEMexplore. And we will have our live site from Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, stepping in to say hello in just a few moments. Now, here at STEMexplore, we are so excited to offer these live connections with dynamic women in STEM careers, featuring sustainable and exciting careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, like I said, this event is part of STEMexplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during virtual live connections just like this one. We want to recognize and thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. And here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit www.earthecho.org to learn more about our programs. You can also access resources like STEMexplore's career profile videos, as well as tune in for upcoming live events, just like this one. Now, like I said, I do want to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites across the country and recognize an after-school program that is joining us today. So I do see that Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa has joined us. Can we get a hello from Cedar Rapids?
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see you again. We're so happy you could tune in. And for those of you watching the live stream, we're excited that you could join us as well. Now, we also have sites joining us today all around the world. And anyone who is watching our live stream can interact and ask questions. So this is just a reminder that you can send in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation to see if you have any of those questions. So simply, if you're watching on YouTube, use the chat space to the right of the viewer. And if you're right here in our Zoom feed, use that chat space that we have available. And we'll be sure to answer your questions as we go along. Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, we will be coming to you live to take your questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome our special guest for EarthEcho's STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection today, Bella Genta. Good afternoon, Bella. How are you?
I'm doing great, Casey. How are you all?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, just to give everyone a little introduction, Isabella, or Bella Genta, is a 2018 Payne Fellow with the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. She is currently studying natural resources and sustainable development in a dual master's program with American University in Washington, D.C., and the University for Peace in San Jose, Costa Rica. Bella is currently in graduate school studying how to protect natural resources like fish, water, clean air, and forests in developing countries. Through her work with the U.S. government, Bella lives and works in developing countries to help design projects and activities that can help people live better, healthier lives, while also helping to conserve the beautiful environments and resources that exist in these areas of the world, such as Costa Rica, where Bella is today. Now, Bella's most recent professional experience includes working on biodiversity conservation programming in the Colombian Amazon and researching ocean security issues for the DC-based think tank, the Stimson Center. After graduating and through the Payne Fellowship, Bella will join USAID's Foreign Service as an environmental officer. And I know that time is coming very soon. So Bella, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your career?
Sure. Thank you, Casey. And you gave a great introduction, so I don't want to repeat anything. But like Casey said, I'm a graduate student. So I finished my undergraduate degree just last year. And I'm now in my second year of my graduate degree studying natural resource management. So how we care for and work with our natural resources, like the things you mentioned, forests, fish, clean air, wildlife, and our oceans, as well as sustainable development, which is a type of programming of development of things like roads and electricity, food systems, and healthcare systems. That make sure that we're using the resources that make these things possible, like soil, water, and energy, in a sustainable or long-lasting way, so that we don't have a negative impact on future generations trying to do the same thing. In order to study both natural resources and sustainable development, I live and study in 2 different places, American University and the University for Peace. So I spend part of my time in Washington, D.C., and the other half of my time in Costa Rica, where I am right now. College and any sort of additional school after college, like a master's degree, can be very expensive. So can flights back and forth between DC and Costa Rica. So in order to afford to be able to do my education and the research that I do here, I applied for and it was awarded a fellowship. A fellowship is just like a scholarship, but it kind of comes with the requirement or the obligation that the organization that's paying for your studies will also have you as an employee in the future once you complete them. So my fellowship is with USAID or USAID. USAID is responsible for funding or giving money to projects in developing countries that will ultimately help them improve the lives of their own citizens. Some of the countries that we work in include Colombia, where I was this past summer, as well as places like Mexico, Peru, South Africa, Kenya, Syria, Afghanistan, India, the Philippines. The list is pretty long. And there are many others. Have you guys heard of countries like that? Any of those countries? At least one? Maybe. USAID funds these kinds of projects all over the world, projects that build roads, improve healthcare, feed people, create jobs, improve access to education, and help protect the environment. Since my fellowship is with USAID, they're paying for my school right now, and I will work with them as soon as I graduate in May. So like Casey said, I'll be joining their foreign service, which is part of the US government that works outside of the country. And the specifics of what I do would depend a lot on what country I'm in and what projects are being funded then. I always work in an embassy, which is the US building that's in any capital city in these developing countries or non-developing countries. Every country has one. But it does include a lot of moving. So even though I'm always working in an embassy, I move every 2 to 4 years. The projects could include stuff like this. The first photo is a man in Madagascar working on an ecotourism project. And the second one here are people in Haiti working as part of a USAID-funded water and sanitation project. So even though I'm an environment officer, the types of projects I would be working on are super, super different.
That's awesome, Bella. You mentioned ecotourism. So I'm just curious about this photograph that we're seeing here. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And maybe somebody at Jefferson High School, can anybody define ecotourism? And if you've never heard that term before, can you take an educated guess of what that means? What is ecotourism? Jefferson High, any thoughts?
Okay, now.
Who wants to take it?
Ava?
Yeah, maybe like traveling the world to out like the environment or like trying to help it.
Okay, you hear that?
Real nice and loud. Repeat that for us, if you will.
Traveling the world to either learn about the environment or help it.
Traveling the world?
Learn about the environment and help it, and possibly traveling the world. Bella,
Yeah.
were they close?
That's very close, and it's a really good guess. So ecotourism is a type of tourism that, let's say, an American comes to Costa Rica and they want to do something like see the beautiful beaches. Not only would an ecotourism company take them to the beach, but they would actually teach them about why the beach is important to Costa Rica and why having a clean beach is really important for not only Costa Ricans, but the wildlife that live here. So it's a form of tourism that's not only good for the environment, but it also teaches people about the environment. So you're definitely on the right path.
And so with that gentleman that's photographed on the left, what exactly is he looking at?
He's looking at some type of plant. I'm not sure exactly because I have not worked in Madagascar. But either he could be telling people about the medicinal properties of that plant, what that plant would be used. In Costa Rica, a lot of the ecotourism is around coffee plantations because that's one of the biggest exports here in Costa Rica. Also in Colombia, they do a lot of stuff with coffee, and people want to taste Colombian or Costa Rican coffee. So instead of just tasting the coffee, they actually talk about how to produce coffee sustainably and all the kinds of things that they're doing around that.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah. So this is a map that shows all the different countries that USAID is currently working in. So I get to move every 2 to 4 years, which has a lot of really cool positives. Like I get to see the world, learn new languages, meet new people, and constantly be learning from these different experiences. But there can also be negatives. Because all my family and all my friends live back in the States, and it can be hard sometimes to make somewhere feel like a home if you're only there for 2 to 4 years, and it's so different. So what would a path into the Foreign Service, I guess, kind of look like? Can be really hard, and even for me was really hard to kind of think about. So the US government, including USAID, has both a civil and a foreign service side. Civil service means you live and work in the United States, most likely in Washington, D.C. And then the foreign service side, which I work in, works outside of the US. So once you answer that question, and if you are interested in the foreign service, like I was, USAID is not the only US government agency that has a foreign service. Some have more of a focus on policy and national security, and others on like things like military and foreign intelligence. But for me, USAID was a perfect fit, especially with my background already being interested in the environment. To join USAID's foreign service, you're required to have any type of advanced degree, so either a master's degree, a doctorate, you can be a medical doctor or a lawyer or even a vet. You just need something beyond a bachelor's degree. And you need at least 2 years of experience working outside of the US. So some people join very young, some do not, and kind of see it as more of a second career. So there's a lot of variety and not just one pathway. So a fellowship is not the only way to join the Foreign Service. But many people, the vast majority of people, actually go into the Peace Corps after graduating college. That's how they get their 2 years international experience, then go to grad school and maybe work or intern for a few years and then apply. So I'd say that's probably between 70 and 80% of people from aid kind of follow that trajectory of doing Peace Corps first.
Wow, that's amazing. And we have had some other STEMExplore mentors that have just finished with their round of the Peace Corps. So it's really interesting to hear, everybody's different experiences and to know that many people with USAID actually are involved in Peace Corps, but not surprising, really, I guess.
Right. And it's cool to see how they link together.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, you've already touched on some realities of this type of career. You've talked a little bit about your fellowship and kind of what USAID provides for that and what you're expected to do in return. But if a student want to go into, to be a foreign service officer, what would say their salary? What would a paycheck look like?
Sure, that's a great question. So to be a when you're a foreign service officer, you follow the same pay schedule or matrix for all foreign service officers. It doesn't matter if it's with the State Department or USAID or with the Department of Defense. And they're based on a series of things, and they have promotions and salary increases kind of built into how long you stay with them, like most companies. But the average base pay for a foreign service officer is almost $100,000 with the potential for additional pay. Additional pay can be kind of confusing, and we kind of in the biz call it danger pay because that's typically what it is. So that would be pay that you're paid on top of your base salary for living or working somewhere that is semi-dangerous to work and live. So for example, when I was in Colombia, there's still a lot of violence there because they had a 50-year-long civil war and tensions are still very high and crime is very high there. So with no negotiations or anything like that, on top of a base salary, every foreign service officer there gets a 15% bonus onto their salary automatically. So that's what that graph means by additional pay.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And this is the graph that's used to determine what our pay is. And it can be really confusing. It's still really confusing for me. So I'm just going to give an overview for you all. Basically, it's saying that your pay is determined based off of a series of steps and grades that basically say how much education do you have, and then how much qualifying experience or how many years have you been working in this field. But there's also a number of additional benefits that aren't worked into these numbers. So when I'm abroad, the agency pays for my housing, so I don't pay rent or a mortgage. And then if I were to have children in the future, they would all get private school paid for by the agency. That wouldn't come out of my salary. So there are a number of like additional benefits that come with the job that aren't just captured by that number on a paper.
That is something really interesting to point out, Bella. I think when we're talking about different careers, and Jefferson High School has joined us for a few different STEMExplore virtual career connections. And I think it's super important to not only talk about, what does your paycheck look like, but also think about what are some benefits that aren't really listed out of the various jobs that are out there in different careers. So that's really interesting. The fact that if you had children, that their private schooling would be paid for is huge. And even the fact that you have a fellowship provided by USAID, and then you have job security basically to then move into a position with them. That's really interesting, and I think super useful for up and coming professionals to know about.
Yeah, and I think something that was really important to me, I knew I wanted to work and live abroad, but something that was important to me was that I was going to be able to come home and see my family if there is a wedding or a birthday or even a funeral or something like that. I wanted to have that flexibility. And because of a really strange law the US has, after I think it's like 24 months being abroad, so 2 years, I'm required to have 2 months leave that I'm required to stay in the US and reconnect with all my US contacts, essentially. So it's built-in vacation time as well.
Wow, that's nice.
So those things can be nice too. Plane tickets are also a benefit.
Yes, absolutely. All right, great. Well, Bella, you've done such a good job kind of laying down and introducing us to your career and what it is that you're doing. So now let's check in with Jefferson High School to see if we have any questions. So let's head over to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to Jefferson High. What questions do you have for Bella?
Okay, Ava.
When you first started the whole process of your career path, did you have any doubts or like things you kind of thought of, like maybe had some doubts along the way?
That's a great question. So when you started on your career path, did you have any doubts?
Yes. So I want to talk about this kind of more at length in a moment, but to give like kind of a quick answer, yes. I actually started as a marine biology major when I was in college, and through a number of experiences, I started thinking, okay, I want to do something else. I want to work abroad, but I also want to work on the environment. And I kind of decided to make this switch, even though I didn't know what a job would look like in that field or what a career would look like. I didn't have access to EarthEcho STEMExplore at that time. So I kind of just took a risk and I said, I want to do this. And I don't know if there are any jobs like this that exist, but if there aren't, then I want to create one. I want to create a company that does this kind of work. So that was really scary. And I did not have a lot of support at that point because it was kind of like a shot in the dark. So I would say that was one time that I had doubts and I was scared. And then my first time, when I'm in Costa Rica, it's really easy because I'm around other graduate students. I live with friends. I live with a host family. It's kind of like living with my family. But when I moved to Colombia to actually do my first like assignment with USAID, I lived by myself for the first time in a country I didn't know that was kind of dangerous. And I was really lonely. I was really lonely when I was there because it was my first time. And I didn't know anyone in not only my town, but the entire country. And at that point, I was kind of doubting what I had gotten myself into. And I learned that it takes me about a month or two to kind of feel settled into a new schedule and a new pace of life and a new job. But those were definitely two times that, I doubted myself, to use your language. But I'm glad I stuck through it.
Great. Jefferson High, let's take another question.
Oh, no.
So what are the requirements for the scholarship thing?
Oh, what are the requirements for the fellowship? Excellent question.
That's a really good question. So my fellowship specifically, not necessarily to apply to it, but it was created with the goal of giving an opportunity to populations in the US that might not otherwise have that. So I'm from a lower socioeconomic background. I'm from a Black and Brown community, and I'm also a woman. So all those things are kind of working against me to join the Foreign Service, which is typically full of older white men. So they're in an effort to diversify the Foreign Service so that it actually represents what the US looks like. fellowships like the one I'm in, the Pain Fellowship, were created. So I checked all those boxes that I was not already kind of a privileged person in that space. I had to have a good GPA. I had to take the GRE, which is kind of like an entrance exam to graduate school, but I had to take that anyway to apply to graduate school. It's kind of like the SAT, which I'm sure you guys have started to talk about. I had to show them something called a FAFSA, which your parents will fill out in a couple of years, which shows kind of where you are socioeconomically. And then I ended up having to go to DC to interview. So I did a written paper during my interview. I had an hour to write a paper. And then I did a one-on-one interview with like a board of people. And that was really, really scary because I had never had an interview with a whole board of people all asking me questions, like totally drilling me. But what they're looking for is diversity, I think, not only in like background, but also diversity in thought. So the other women that are part of my cohort are totally different from me. No one else is an environment officer. No one else is from Florida. No one else, my background, my family's Filipino. No one else is Asian. So it's not like a one size fits all kind of thing. But I hope that answered your question.
That's really interesting and amazing. And you brought up something about the interview and how that can be scary, especially if you're in front of a panel of people. So I think another good piece of advice as of now would be, start Googling interview skills or interview questions. If you're in some kind of club like STEM club at Jefferson High, maybe you can talk about, what are some interview questions and start kind of honing your interview skills, because it can be very, very scary. Even if you have an interview with somebody it can give you a lot of anxiety and stress. But I think planning for those things, especially if you plan to try and acquire scholarships or fellowships when you start applying to schools, you're going to have interviews. And if you already have a job, I started working when I was 15. I had lots of interviews. So that definitely helped to prepare. So all those things will definitely help you along the way. All right, Jefferson High, do we have another question?
She has another question. What is your question?
Can the job be dangerous?
Can this job be dangerous?
Great question. Can the job be dangerous?
That is a really good question. I think any job can be dangerous. I think any country can be dangerous, if that's kind of what the question's getting to. There are countries that I would go to potentially that are in war, like Syria or Afghanistan, and that could be dangerous. But being smart about the situation, and you receive special training and special protections wherever you go. So I have never felt personally like I'm in danger in any sort of way. Even like walking around Bogota, Colombia, which has a very high crime rate, I wasn't out by myself as a woman after 10 o'clock at night, or I held my bag close to me, or just kind of had like common sense. But I think those are all things that I would do if I was in the US in a big city like Washington, DC, or New York or Chicago. So I think it can be dangerous, but they give you all the tools and all the skills you need to stay safe in those situations.
Great questions, Jefferson High. We're going to come back to you in just a few minutes. So Bella, why don't we kind of move along with your journey, and let's take a few steps back and maybe talk a little bit about kind of where you've been and how you got your start and where you grew up and what inspired you to go into this type of field.
Sure. So I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, which is on the Gulf Coast of Florida, or the west side. I'm about 2 hours away from Disney. That's how I like to orient it. And from a young age, living so close to the ocean, I always loved it and the animals that live there, especially whales and dolphins. So the first photo you see there is actually me on career day when I was about 7 years old, and I was dressed up as a marine biologist for SeaWorld. In Sarasota, there's also this really cool place called Moat Marine Lab and Aquarium. And I loved being there, and I loved when my mom would let me go and just kind of spend the entire day there. So as soon as I was, I think, 12 or 13, I had to be to volunteer there. I started volunteering as a docent. So the people that stand around and just tell you about the animals or answer questions if you have anything you want to ask. In high school, I did 2 internships at Moat, one with their education department and one working with seahorses and breeding seahorses there. I also volunteered and helped a friend of mine with his nonprofit called the Stow It, Don't Throw It project, which brought awareness and action to the problem of fishing line in our oceans and the impact that had. The second photo is me and that friend with Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is kind of like my role model when I was growing up. She's one of the most famous marine biologists, explorers, and authors in that field. And she was from Florida, or she grew up in Florida as well.
And I'm going to interrupt you here, Bella, because we do have an EarthEcho connection here. Pictured in the middle, she referenced a friend with the Stow It, Don't Throw It project. That is actually Sean Russell. He is the Water Challenge Manager right here at EarthEcho International. I also worked with Bella. I used to work at Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium, and I was one of her mentors in one of her high school internships. And so we have a lot of connections, and we've talked about this before with some of our partner sites during our STEMExplore programs of making those connections and using your network to your advantage. And so I reconnected with Bella to ask her to be a part of this, to tell you all about her amazing journey. So continue on. Sorry for that interruption.
No, that's good. That's good. So I graduated high school in 2014, and I moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and attended UNF, University of North Florida, which is a medium-sized public college. UNF was not my first choice for school, but because of financial reasons and other things going on with my family at the time, that was the school that I ended up going to. But I tried to make the most of it and just said yes to every opportunity that the school had. UNF, for some reason, had a lot of scholarship money available for people who wanted to travel and study abroad outside of the United States. In my 4 years in college, I ended up traveling to Peru, Morocco, Spain, Vietnam, and Cambodia, all part of my coursework, so getting course credit for that. I also decided to run for student government and later served as the student body's vice president and president. And during my last year of college, I worked within the environment office at my school and collaborated with our local zoo to host a summit that taught students how to most effectively talk about climate change and climate science to their friends and families. While all these activities impacted me in tremendous ways, it was my study abroad trips that changed me the most and led me to where I am today. So I kind of mentioned this earlier to the first question that was asked to me, but I started my undergraduate as a coastal biology major. And as I was traveling, I was kind of experiencing like, okay, this is what life looks like for people in other countries. And I was kind of like, okay, I don't know how to make this fit with my marine biology because I also really love the ocean, but I really care about this too. And I finally went to Cambodia at the end of my junior year. So after my third year of college, I already studied 3 years as a coastal biology student. I decided to switch my major because while I was in Cambodia, I worked with a small community there that was working to protect their mangrove forest. So I don't think in Iowa there are mangroves, but mangroves are a type of tree that grow along the edge of the ocean and kind of beach. And they're really important for a number of reasons. And the community I was working with saw that even though they didn't have all the textbooks and all the scientific literature about why mangroves were important, they could see that when the mangroves were healthy, their fish were healthy and they had a lot more catch of their fish. They could make more money from it and they could improve their community's social conditions and have more power advocating for themselves to their government. So after coming back from this trip, I decided I wanted to do more work like this and I could kind of see how they kind of blended together. But I didn't know who outside of the small community in Cambodia was doing that kind of stuff. So I took a big risk there and changed my major and it's worked out for the best. Since then, I started graduate school and I kept doing internships like I was doing in high school and college. My internships in graduate school have been a mixed bag. I worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, DC. I worked for a think tank. And I'm very happy that I did those experiences because I learned that I do not want to work at a think tank and I do not want to work on Capitol Hill. But I would have never realized that had I not taken that risk and that chance. Kind of by a stroke of luck, I started working and volunteering with an Indigenous group here in Costa Rica called the Kikirisi. They live about 40 minutes away from me. And not only have I made a number of professional contacts through that connection, but I also have a number of close friends that are now part of the Kikirisi community. And now kind of my research and a lot of my focus in graduate school has been working on natural resource management within Indigenous communities. Does everyone know what an Indigenous community is? Or maybe can we take
That's a great question. Jefferson High, what does Indigenous community mean?
Ibrahim, you want to say? Come on, Ava?
Local or native?
Yeah,
Local, native.
exactly. Great job. So in the US, those might be kind of like our Native American population. So they're considered the first people of that land, and they tend to maintain some of their more traditional ways of life and means of life and culture. There are indigenous communities here in Costa Rica. I think there's at least 40 different denominations, but I work with the Kikirisi or volunteer with them. Again, I wouldn't have learned about these people or their way of life had I not gone to one. It was a potluck, actually. It was a potluck that I started meeting people at. So not even an educational thing, just something I was a little hungry and a little bit interested, and I decided to go. But I have made some really good friends and really good professional connections through that. So
and this is just a map kind of showing where Bella is concentrating her work, but her home is in Florida. So we just wanted to point that out.
So this was when a picture from when I invited one of my friends from the Kikirisi community to come and talk to my other classmates about kind of traditional environmental knowledge that her family has passed down through the generations. And a lot of that was like how to make shampoo from certain plants or things that you would eat if your stomach was upset and stuff like that. So she doesn't go to a normal doctor, but she has everything she needs to make herself stay healthy from the land that she lives on. That's a school group that went to visit the Kikirisi. So trying to foster community kind of between Costa Ricans living in the big cities like San Jose and also their indigenous neighbors.
Wonderful. So Bella, here at EarthEcho International, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. So can you elaborate a little bit more and connect those dots of how your career contributes to a sustainable future?
Sure. And you talked a little bit about the work that I was doing in Colombia, working with the Amazon. So I think it's easy to see how certain aspects of my work directly on protecting the environment or helping it be sustainable. But in USA, there's this thing called development is conservation. So even the projects where we aren't working directly on environmental issues, we're still promoting conservation through everything that we do. So development or helping people have more prosperous lives helps prevent human conflict and war that can impact the environment negatively. Development also improves human health via the things we eat, the medicine and healthcare we have access to, and it prevents the spread of disease. These things all impact the environment indirectly as well. And lastly, development also encourages international collaboration and discourse or talking to each other and being able to work together. And that's something that I believe is extremely important if we're going to come together and address the big issues of today, like climate change.
Excellent. All right. Well, now is another time for some questions. So let's head over to Cedar Rapids, Iowa with Jefferson High School STEM Club. What questions do you have for Bella?
Where are you?
Right now?
Where am I right now? I am outside of San Jose, Costa Rica. So Costa Rica is a country in Central America. It's just south of Nicaragua and just north of Panama. Have you guys ever heard of the Panama Canal in any of your history classes or anything like that yet? Maybe? That's okay. But I'm in Costa Rica, and I'm about a 40-minute drive outside of San Jose. So San Jose is a big bustling city. I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere right now. The city that I live in has one grocery store, and it's not open every day. It has about 3 restaurants, and it takes me about 25 minutes to walk from my house to the grocery store, and I don't have a car or a bike or anything like that. So if you're hearing birds or dogs or any of those things, that's why. I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere right now, but basically Costa Rica has 2 coasts on either side, the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Kind of like the Gulf of Mexico, and they both have mountain ranges, and I'm in the middle part. It's called the Central Valley, in a little town called Ciudad Colón. I would encourage you to look at photos. It's a cool place.
Yeah, absolutely. And Costa Rica, I've been there before. It is a beautiful, wonderful country with absolutely wonderful people. It's a great place to visit. All right, Jefferson, hi. Let's take another question.
So how does your job play a role in global warming?
Was the question, how does your job play a role in global warming?
Yes.
Great question. So that's a really good question.
I can say it can impact it both positively and negatively. So a lot of what we do right now within an environment portfolio or within the work that I do is that we try to work on things like climate change adaptation and mitigation. So climate change adaptation, an example of that would be working with farmers so that they're using practices and certain types of crops that will fit the new climate, basically of what their country is expected to experience under climate change conditions or global warming conditions. And mitigation is actually trying to stop the impacts of climate change or at least reduce them a little bit. So in Colombia, we work with reforestation efforts and trying to get people to leave trees on their properties or to increase their tree coverage on their properties, and then actually giving them money or an incentive to keep those trees there, because trees can hold in carbon that would otherwise be in the environment or in the atmosphere, making it warmer. So we try to work on things like that. This is a slightly political question because we would like to be doing more. I personally, as Bella Genta, would like to be doing more climate change adaptation and mitigation stuff. But that is not being funded as much as it had been in the past. So it can be kind of difficult, but we are trying to do that kind of work. However, foreign service officers living and working abroad also take a lot of airplane flights. And so that's something I'm trying to struggle with right now, or kind of struggling with right now. How much carbon am I using every time I get on an airplane between DC and Costa Rica or Colombia or any of these other countries that are hours and hours away from the US? How much is that contributing to the problem that I'm trying to solve too? So we can always be kind of like a balance. And I think that it's important that we think about our individual impacts as well as the things that we're doing through our work.
Wonderful. Jefferson, hi. Let's take another question.
So is there anything we can do now to prepare us for jobs like this in the future?
I didn't hear the last half of that. Is there anything we can do now to prepare us for?
Jobs like this.
Oh, jobs like this in the future. That's great because we actually have a slide for that. So Bella, what kind of advice would you give these students to prepare? Because I do think that this is such an incredibly interesting job, and it's really a way to marry your passion for the environment with also your passion for people. So what words of wisdom would you have for them? What kind of?
Sure. In terms of actual skill set, that would totally depend. So some of my friends are engineers and they're doing the same job as me, or they're a foreign service officer, but they're working on water engineering. And some of my friends work on infant health and mortality and making sure that moms and babies are happy and healthy when they come into this world. Another friend of mine is a teacher and she does this as well. So I would say follow your passions, and kind of the big three things that I think would make you a great foreign service officer one day is to say yes to both opportunities and challenges. So everything is a chance to learn and grow, not only as professionals or scientists, but also as human beings. Because when we're going abroad, we're connecting with human beings. We're not connecting with a country or project, we're connecting with each other. I would say travel as much as you can, even if it's to a part of your town or your own state that you've never seen before. The world is really big and there's so much that we can learn from each other, especially from people and cultures that are different from our own, even if it's just right down the street. I would say stay curious and take risk. One of my favorite things about my job and moving as much as I do is that I get to stay curious, like I'm a little kid still, and continue learning about the world around me and my place in it. I took risk, like I mentioned, changing my major or moving to another country by myself. And even though it can be scary or lonely sometimes, like I mentioned, I'm so thankful and I'm glad I did. The hardest part of my job is not, for me personally, is not being abroad and it's not living in semi-dangerous areas, but it's actually learning new languages. For me, languages are super, super hard to learn. So if you have a foreign language already or you're trying to learn a second language, I would say stick with it. It's so much easier the younger you are and the more time you have to be exposed to it. But I guess that would be like my only piece of like practical advice, language.
That's a really good one. And I know we've talked with some of the students at Jefferson High before about traveling and some of those benefits. And of course, everybody wants to be able to travel and have that covered. But also thinking about just, some different ways you could possibly get to travel. And the fact that you also mentioned, Bella, that you have friends that are working with USAID that are not working in the environment, but there are medical fields. And I know there's a lot of interest in the medical field right there at Jefferson High who we're connected with, but also engineers. And so if you think you want to travel the world and experience other cultures and other people, you can definitely find that. And Bella is a great example, and working with USAID is a wonderful example of that as well. All right, Jefferson High, do we have another question? I think we have time for one or two more if you have them.
What are some obstacles you faced before you get your job? Yeah, that job.
Say that again.
What are some obstacles that you faced when you got before you got your job?
Oh, what are some obstacles you faced before you got your job?
And after.
That's really
And after. Obstacles before and after. Good question.
I'll do the after just because that's more immediate for me. When I signed up for my fellowship, I didn't know, I had never worked abroad. I had only been abroad or learned abroad or volunteer, but I had never actually worked an actual job where I go to an office every day in another country speaking another language. So that was really difficult for me, even though I was already speaking Spanish for about 5 months before I moved to Colombia. The language I used to talk to my family or to order dinner at a restaurant was very different than the language that I would use to tell someone that there needs to be more government oversight or there needs to be different types of natural resource management. I had never had to use those words in another language. And it was really hard for me to feel confident, not only in my technical capacity, but also my language capacity to make sure what I was saying was getting across and that I wasn't looking dumb. That was something that I was more scared of. But I think it was more internal because I think people were just happy that I was speaking their language and trying my best. So I don't know how much of it was an internal obstacle, but I think I put more pressure on myself than I needed to. And before I got my job, let me think, I've had a lot. I've had a lot of obstacles just because I'm the first person in my family to do this kind of stuff, to go for a higher education degree, to join the Foreign Service, live abroad, any of those things. But there have been times in my career, or even like in my college career and what I was doing with student government, and then also now that I think I'm one of the youngest, if not the youngest, Foreign Service officers. I did not look like and I did not sound like what a lot of student body presidents looked and sounded like growing up in North Florida. So I think a lot of people either didn't expect a lot of me or didn't necessarily count my voice the same. And I constantly had to come prepared and still have to come prepared, what I feel like 110 times more than the person sitting next to me. And so that put a lot of pressure on me as just a person that still needed to take care of myself and do those kinds of things, sleep, eat, all of the above. But I think it actually ended up being a great learning opportunity because I was having to come super prepared and super ready to fight and talk about the things that I really cared about.
Awesome. All right, Jefferson High, do we have one more question? Perfect.
Who's Katie Murray?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, who's Katie Murray? Is that what you said? She's actually our communications coordinator here at EarthEcho. So she is in this call as well and on the live stream, just helping us out.
That's a good question.
Anybody else have another question for Bella?
So do you know anyone in the medical field that does this kind of job, but like not in the same medical field as you?
Or any other field that could apply to do a job like this, not just engineering?
Excellent. So you talked a little bit about that. And I know, raise your hands at Jefferson High, who has an interest in the medical field? So I just want you to see that response because there is a lot in there. All right, though, but we have someone sitting up front. What is her career interest?
Yeah. Pediatrician and you were cardiologist, right?
Okay. So pediatrician, radiology. We do have some engineering interest in this room as well. So go for it, Bella. Oh, Bella, hang on. Oh, she muted her microphone, and I'm willing to bet there might be some dogs encroaching on our connection.
Some host family.
Oh, okay. Okay,
That's
great.
okay. So there are two examples I can give, kind of both medical. Actually, I could give three examples. So one of my mentors within USAID actually was a practicing pediatrician for a number of years, and she wanted to work and travel. Her husband is also in the Foreign Service, so that was a draw as well, that she could go abroad with him. But now she works as a medical officer essentially, and through that she can either work in the embassy as a pediatrician, as a doctor for the people who work in the embassy, or she has the option to actually be working in communities, helping design programs that would be providing medical care to the communities that we work in. So that's kind of a two-part. For a pediatrician, she could do either. One of my other friends is a veterinarian, and he was practicing that and had his own practice for a number of years. And now he's working abroad trying to develop the best practices for how to most efficiently raise cattle in sub-Saharan Africa. And he's using his understanding of animals and agriculture, I guess, and cattle raising to help communities abroad. But there's everything from nutrition to, like I said, maternal care, immunology. So how the spread of disease and stuff like that is really important when we're talking about developing countries, especially near the equator. I hope that answered your question, but I could elaborate more. There are a lot of us.
That's great. Thank you so much. This gives us such a wonderful insight into your world and into the career path that you're on. And I so appreciate you taking the time. So thank you so much, Bella. Thank you, Jefferson High. You all had awesome questions today. Good job. Those are fantastic questions for Bella. And I'd also like to thank everybody else tuning in live, as well as our STEMExplore partner sites all over the United States. Thank you for tuning in, and especially a big thank you to our interactive site, Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Now, EarthEcho has some exciting opportunities coming up. STEMexplore will continue to feature women in STEM careers with our virtual Career Connection series. We have several live events scheduled for this month, actually tomorrow, and we will have those events scheduled throughout December as well. So again, visit our website, www.earthecho.org, to see our entire lineup and to register. If you do register for these live events, you are able to be on live and chat questions to our STEMexplore experts, such as Bella. And of course, be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho International on our social media channels, as well as that website. And a huge thank you to our funder, our supporter, United Technologies, for their tremendous support of our programming. And again, a huge thank you to our wonderful STEMexplore mentor, Bella Genta. So on behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you all for joining us, and keep exploring. Bye-bye.